Hi guys, it's Jill, and today's video is going to be a little bit different than normal. If you follow the podcast, you know I recently did a series on dominance theory. For those of you that aren't super interested in podcasts that are several hours long, I thought I would try and make a shorter version for you here and kind of just sum everything up to the best of my ability, but I'm naturally long-winded. We'll see how this goes. Where we start is, have you ever had a trainer or instructor tell you that you have to be the boss mare, the alpha, the leader of your horse, you have to be dominant, and if your horse tries to be dominant towards you, you have to instill respect in it, and often that just means being really aggressive towards the horse. Before I lose you at the, oh my god, she's so sensitive, tree hugger over here, doesn't want to hurt the horse, you know, ooh. Just listen, because believe it or not, I have researched this at great length. If you wish to argue, I really encourage you to listen to both episodes 30 and 31 of season 2 of my podcast. You'll get the full picture, and then we can have a conversation about it, because there's really no point in arguing if you don't know the other side, you know? This is a really heavy topic for a lot of people. It's what we found our training on usually, especially in traditional riding. It's founded on you have to be the leader and your horse has to respect you. Today, I'm gonna tell you why that's not true. So let's get into it. Alright, so let's just jump into it. I have my notes in front of me and let's rock and roll. But again, I want to warn that this is the heavily condensed version of a really important, broad, multifaceted theory that has been widely perpetrated throughout our industry. So don't use this as your only resource. You can check out the ones that I will link down in the description, and please listen to the podcast episodes because I really go in on not only talking about all of this, but also answering a lot of questions that you guys ask me on Instagram to talk about all the different things that we're often told and why they're wrong. Anyway, to get started, we have to define dominance. The definition of dominance in the dictionary is the most powerful, important, and influential. Conventionally, it really is used as a way to smite behaviors that we don't like. So when the horse is pinning its ears or kicking out, if it is not listening while you're riding, all of those get labeled as dominant behavior. That doesn't really add up with the studies that have been done on equine ethology. That's where we're gonna go with this. So all of this started by a Norwegian biologist. I cannot pronounce their name to save my life, so I will be putting it down here. They're the one that came up with the pecking order. Started with hens. Essentially, hen A could peck on hen B and hen C, but hen B could not peck on hen A, but could peck on hen C. Hen C couldn't peck on anybody. So that's a hierarchy, if you will. Somebody's at the top, everybody's subordinate, and then the subordinates can pick on the further subordinates, and it's a linear kind of thing. Like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not how horses work. It's not one horse's relationship to the entire herd. In fact, the studies that have been done on equine cognitive abilities actually show that there is no evidence to support that they have a concept of respect and relationship from themselves to the entire herd of horses. It's more of a one-to-one relationship. Horse A's relationship to horse B, and then their relationship to horse C and horse D. And horse C has a relationship to B and D, and like it all goes different directions, it changes, it's not set in stone. It cracks me up now to hear people say, they're like, oh, well, you know, my mare used to be the lead mare in the herd, but now she's kind of like falling lower on the totem pole, and the horse that's the leader now was the low man, and I don't get it. And I'm like, it's because the concept that we use to support dominance theory in our training is not founded in science. So following the Norwegian biologist study on pecking order, we also have the studies that came out in the 80s about herd mentality, and those horses were studied under the assumption that there was going to be dominant behavior. This is the concept of confirmation bias. The researchers looking for a pecking order, looking for a hierarchy and behaviors that supported their idea. Recent studies that have relooked at those, and studies beyond that have studied, take a shot every time I say study, that have studied herd interactions do not support dominance theory and hierarchies. They looked at it from an empirical view, and the fact is 90% of interactions, horse-to-horse relationships, are very peaceful and quiet and relaxed. It's when the environment starts playing a role that we see more aggressive behaviors, but that does not mean that one horse is dominant. So I want to talk about one of the most powerful videos I've ever seen on dominance theory, and the one that really inspired me to start learning more about it. It's called The Case Against Dominance / pack theory. You can find it on YouTube. I'll link it down below. Now, this video is predominantly focused on like cats and dogs, but it applies to horses as well. I want to talk about Lisa Radosta. She's a doctor of veterinary medicine. She said, calling animals spiteful is a cry for education. When somebody's being anthropomorphic, it means they are taking traits that are unique to humans and putting them on animals, like calling dogs guilty or cats spiteful. If you want to learn more about why that's not supported by science, watch that video. This one's about horses and I'm trying to be concise, but when we call horses disrespectful or rude or they're being jerks or marish, none of that is supported by science. It's all justification. I'm gonna whoa back, talk about that in a moment. James Serpell, a PhD and a professor of animal welfare and ethics, says the studies that have tried to identify if the animal is actually spiteful or guilty have come up negative. So not only is it anthropomorphic, but the studies that have tried to prove, they come up negative. You can't prove it because those animals do not have that concept. All they have is a reinforcement and a learning history. There's always a reason for behavior. If they have been taught behaviors are wrong and they do them, they anticipate punishment.
In here on the note of punishment, because I had to cut out the part of the video where I talked about it because this is 40 minutes long. So offering you the opportunity to pause and read and consider some of these effects from the book Equine Behavior Principles in Practice. Okay.
And I strongly advise, if you use punishment, say if your horse is biting you and you smack it in the face every time it bites. Very common practice in the equestrian industry. I mean, if you go on any Facebook forum, somebody's like, my horse is biting, what do I do? People are like, bite it back, pinch it on the neck, bite it with your teeth, bite its ear. Like, it's gross, frankly. We would never do that to dogs, yet for some reason it's okay with horses because they don't yelp. So if you think about, in the case of a horse that's biting and it gets smacked every time, it gets punished for the behavior every single time. So why is the horse still biting? Well, the conventional justification is that the horse is being disrespectful, he's being dominant. That's not supported by science and is also a completely unhelpful explanation to what's going on. What we should really be asking is, I am hurting this animal. Every single time it bites, it knows something bad's gonna happen. It knows it's gonna get punishment. So why does the horse feel the need to bite even though he's going to get hit? So that motivation for that behavior has to be really strong. And that's what I think we should be asking ourselves about, not whether the horse is dominant or not. Think about when you first started riding. Kids, when you start teaching them to brush a horse, they're like, and you're like, you can brush a little harder. And they're like, well, I don't want to hurt it. You tell them to lead the horse to the arena and pull on the lead. And they're like, but I don't want to hurt him. That's how we start out. Slowly over the course of learning to ride and learning how we are supposed to interact with horses, we learn that you have to be aggressive to get what you want. You cannot simultaneously believe that you love the animal and the aforementioned Facebook forums where when a horse is biting, you bite back physically with your teeth or you smack it. So in order to reduce that cognitive dissonance, you have to say one of the other is not true. What you do to make it more comfortable mentally for you to still love the animal and still justify those behaviors is come up with a construct for how you interact with the animal and saying that the animal is being disrespectful, that it's for the animal's own good. And also we say that those things don't hurt the animal. There's no evidence to support that. In fact, there are studies that show that a certain layer of the horse's skin is actually thinner than a human. They're more sensitive than we are. And still we say, oh, if you kick him, it doesn't hurt. The things that we commonly do are justified because of cognitive dissonance. You cannot stand to love an animal and treat it how it often gets treated when behaviors we don't like come about. When owners start to look into the science and change the way they interact with their animals, they touch on in the video. They say that owners often feel guilty because they don't want to do the things they feel they have to get their animals to behave.
And her feet are moving off that feel of that halter. I was trying to get her to like me and to respect me, to take care of me, but that's not how it works.
In order to do those things, there's this really common attitude towards considering animals' emotions that it's laughable. To consider the idea that you might be hurting a horse or that he might be stressed out or anxious. Like, think about when horses spook, and it's something that we are like, you know, our big human frontal lobe brains are like, it's a plastic bag, that's not scary, oh my god, get over it. But the horse doesn't know what that is. He's terrified. His learning part of his brain has completely shut off. And it's just the, oh my god, I'm about to die part. And we're like, oh my god, you're such an idiot, get over it. To say to someone, hey, maybe he's actually afraid, it's genuinely scary to him, is laughable. Or that the horse could be depressed without his friends. To consider that the horse has emotions, or that when you hit it, it might hurt. Animals have emotions. It is scientifically proven, and to discount that is to discount science and fact. Beyond that, there's often this like unwritten idea amongst trainers and equestrians. The animals are somehow like predestined to try and usurp our authority, and that they are just out to get us. It's like you spend your entire time working with the animal waiting for it to do something wrong and correct it, instead of really praising all of the good stuff. How often when you're leading your horse and he's pulling you to the grass because he wants to graze, and you're just trying to get from point A to point B, and you're leading your horse and he's pulling you over to the grass, how often do you correct him for doing that? You pull on the lead, you jerk his head up, and you say, come on, we're walking forward. How often do you reward the horse for walking forward? If your idea of a reward is just the absence of you yanking on the horse's face, that's not a reward, that's relief. I personally do not want to train my animal on the idea that the only way to deal with me is to avoid me. And I'm going to talk about join up in a little bit, communicate some ideas that I have around it.
Here popping in to tell you guys that I actually ended up recording an entire podcast episode responding to someone who did not like the podcast on dominance theory and how I talked about join up. So I actually did an entire episode specifically talking about join up, and I go way more in depth than I ever could in this video. So please give that a listen. It will be linked down below, and that way we can just kind of keep this video shorter, you know, and if you want to listen to that, you can.
When we come at horses from this perspective that if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. If you hand feed them treats, they're going to learn to bite. If you don't correct bad behavior, it's going to get worse and the horse will take over. That sets you on a mindset of working with your animal as if they're an adversary, an enemy, instead of your partner. You're not working with them, you're just trying to keep their behavior at bay, which leads me to a quote from Susan Friedman. She is an incredible voice in the animal behavior consultant industry, and she was recently on the EquiTheory Podcast by Alexander Kurland. It's episode 113 called Susan Friedman, Humane Hierarchy Part 1. I'm gonna read it. So she said, as I walked through the animal care or animal training world, I was really stunned by this use of unnecessary force, this pervading philosophy that our role as caregivers is to stop problem behavior. So think about that for a second. It's not explicit when you start working with animals, but that's kind of what we do. We don't really reward the animals for doing the things that we like. We just punish them for the things that we don't, and then expect them to just know our rules and how to interact in our world when it's not a part of their ethology. It's like the mugging behavior. People get so annoyed with horses that are all over you when you have treats, but they're foragers. That's what they are designed to do. They're designed to sniff out food, and if it's on your person and they don't have anything else in their repertoire, that's what they're gonna do. So you have to teach them that keeping their head out of your space will get them treats. You can't just expect them to figure that out on their own. You have to teach it if you want your horse to behave the way that you do. Sorry if the frame's a little bit different. I had to change out the battery, but I'm gonna continue reading this quote. There's this idea that it's the responsibility of the animals, and in some ways what is implied is that the behavior is independent of context, and that the best avenue to understanding and changing behavior is understanding the context that supports that behavior and changing the context. So what she's saying and all of that is that labeling is dangerous and discounts the environment and why the animal is doing what they're doing. You completely ruin the animal's shot at being a good creature by just saying that they're dominant, or that they're pushy, or they're jerks, or they're just marish. Then you have no chance at moving forward and looking at literally any other explanation for why the animal is doing what they're doing. Your search stops. The horse is just stuck being a jerk. So take, for example, a horse that when you go to girth them up, they pin their ears and they swish their tail, they stomp their feet, and they would bite you if it weren't for the cross ties. If you label the horse as grouchy, the horse is just grouchy. There's nothing you can do, and you and the horse are both doomed to dealing with that behavior for the duration of the time that he's going to be girthed up, for the rest of his life. And beyond that, it's circular reasoning. Why is the horse biting? Because he's dominant. How do you know he's dominant? Because he's biting. Well, why is he biting? Because he's dominant. A, it doesn't explain anything. B, it's not supported by science. And C, you can't go anywhere, and you both just have to deal with it forever. But if you say, I wonder why the horse is acting that way, particularly in the biting example I gave, if you're punishing the behavior and it's still not going away, it's really time to take a look at why that behavior is continuing, why the horse is so motivated to continue his attempts to communicate. But in the case of a girth, usually due to ulcers. If the horse has stomach ulcers and his stomach hurts, being girthed up can be extremely painful. If you label the horse as grouchy or as a jerk or as being marish, then you have no shot at solving the ulcers. You won't know. Your search for information stops at labeling the horse he has a bad personality, and that sucks for everyone everyone involved, because you run the risk of getting bitten and your horse is uncomfortable and in pain for the rest of his life because nobody will give him the benefit of the doubt and try to solve his problem. So when we talk about why those things aren't helpful, what is helpful? Positive reinforcement has been shown, and according to these behaviorists, to be wildly more beneficial in not only improving the relationship with your animal and changing the way they view you, to they look to you for direction because good things happen when you're around, and when you ask them to do something, good things happen, instead of if you ask them to do something and they don't, or they don't understand, they get punished. There's this fear involved and increases anxiety and can increase aggression. In some horses, when they exhibit biting behaviors, if you punch them or smack them, what ends up happening is some horses will just snap at you and then bolt, or like reel back because they know that they're gonna get hit, but they're still trying to communicate to you. Your hands become bad things. Your horse will start avoiding your hand because he knows bad things are gonna happen, and they start flinching and dodging and avoiding you. A, is unnecessarily cruel, and B, it doesn't teach the horse anything. All you've done is say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, and not given them any other tools to do what you want by your human definition. We are the ones that are asking them to do the things that we want and be performance animals or companion animals, so it's up to us to be the ones that educate them and teach them how to interact in our world. So again, studies don't show that horses have the mental capacity to see themselves on the hierarchy. They see themselves having one-to-one relationships with individual horses, not one being the leader or the boss or anything like that. And I think this idea comes from those studies that I mentioned earlier, where the lead stallion and the lead mare in wild herds are the ones that are in control of everybody else. But it's more nuanced than that. It's often the ones that are most motivated due to lack of resource or history or trauma, that they are the ones that are most motivated to protect and seek out resources. So the reason we get this idea of lead mares is because they are the ones that are frequently needing more resources. They're lactating, so they need more water, so they're the ones that often motivate the herd to move and go find water or change grazing patterns. They all kind of start signaling and asking like, hey, do you think it's a good idea? Can we move? Like, I want to change places. And they start signaling to everyone, and then they kind of make this collective group decision. When one horse starts to depart, the others follow, and that's typically where you get the idea of the leader. But the difference is that leader is leading by leaving. In horse training, we lead by aggressing. Whichever horse is most motivated to change locations does not chase everyone around and round them up and bite them and tell them to go the direction that they want them to go, or else what they do is they just leave, and then the herd follows. It's based on the idea that you have to aggress and you have to make the horse submit to you, but that's not how dominance actually works in the wild, and dominance is probably not even the right word. It's not conducive to being in the wild to be an adversary. In a herd, they need to be tightly banded together. They need to feel comfortable and confident with each other. So now we get into why this has continued. The first thing to note is tradition is really powerful. It is really hard to question your superiors, especially if you're just entering the industry and you know nothing. How we learn in the horse world is by asking people that are knowledgeable on the subject, and you are at the mercy of whatever they tell you is truth, and you have to believe it. Unless you spend time researching, then you're kind of stuck. Most people that ride horses have never picked up a book on horse training, horse behavior, or the ones that are supported by science. You end up reading things from people that don't have science to back them up. They have anecdotal experience and whatever has worked for them.
Hi guys, I just want to jump in here and say, first of all, apologies for the aggressive attitude. I have no idea what was going on this day. It's been so long I don't even remember, but I am not trying to be like, so sorry. In no way am I trying to say that everyone in the horse world is just incapable of doing their own research. Of course, that's not true. A lot of people that ride and have trainers, and a lot of trainers do continuing education and research and still don't agree with me. That is fine. But what I have a problem with, and that I am attempting to address in this video, when you have a trainer, they have years of experience, they are your superior, and you're paying them to teach you about horses. When you listen to them and you have all these things presented to you as fact, it's really difficult for you to be like, well, maybe I should question. Beyond that, you don't want to offend and be like, well, actually, I read this thing on the internet, you know? It's really difficult to come from that place. I'm not trying to degrade at all the people that have written books that are not based in science and are anecdotal in their experience and their training methods. Humans are fallible, and And that's why I value empirical evidence and research so much, because those things give you unbiased most of the time if they're done well. My point here is to encourage you to look outside of even this video, other people, studies, everything, and decide for yourself. Because whether you like it or not, when you're working with a horse, you are training them. In that process, the whole point is to ask why and figure out what works best for you and your horse. I am a firm believer, and I found my entire social media website is all dedicated to giving people more alternatives based in the information that I find as I find it, to help horse owners, lovers, and trainers make informed decisions that are based on current science and research. I have such a strong emphasis and such a strong passion for evidence and research because I find that tradition is often super rigid and really resistant to change, and that's not exactly conducive to doing the best you can all the time. And that's not to say that there's any guilt or any shame in having never looked at research or just doing things based off of what your trainer says. You can only do the best you can until you know better. And when you know better, you can do better. And that's why I value research so much, because it gives you so many options and you're so empowered in what you're working with. So then you can just make the best decision possible for you and your animal. That's why I do what I do. And I am open-minded and open to not agreeing with this video in a year. I already don't agree with my attitude in this video. I find it very annoying and cringy, but I hope that is not totally off-putting. The evidence that I am presenting, really just want to reiterate, I am not trying to guilt or shame anyone who at present or before watching this video or even after this video doesn't agree with me. That's okay. I'm not trying to guilt you or shame you or anything. I am just presenting what I know and what I have found through studies and listening to behaviorists who do this for a profession. And I hope to get there one day myself. So I hope that this makes some sense, and we're gonna crack on with the video. Okay, so joke's on me. I thought we were done, but I also don't like the next part of what I said. But essentially, I was talking about how we are often marketed to by trainers who practice natural horsemanship and that sort of thing, that you are communicating with the horse in the horse's language. But often those practices are really aggressive and abusive, and I am not trying to sound like a tree hugger. I hurt PETA, like, ugh, but I am still a trainer and I still want to be able to do all of the things that I want to do with my horse. And if you don't know, I used to be a very competitive eventer, and I would love to get back to doing that one day. But the thing is, I don't want to do it at my horse's expense anymore. And a lot of modern training comes at the horse's expense. You can look at the videos and see the horse's eyes bugging out of their skull. They have like triangle eyes where their brow is arched, their nostrils are pulled back and they're wrinkled, and their ears are pinned. And of course, this does not go for every modern trainer. This does not go for every modern training umbrella. I'm not referring to everyone. However, there are a lot of really popular trainers and a lot of internet trainers that I see on like TikTok and Instagram, and there's a lot going on that it makes me really sad to see these people discussing how their horses need to be dominated and they need to understand that they're not the boss. And that's a fine ideology, but the way it's carried out is often a lot of shaking, hitting the horse in the face with flags.
We'll see if we can get him to go out and around, but I also want you to experience power position here. So I'm just going to get him to yield to pressure a little bit here, see what he does. First of all, he doesn't seem too darn spooky. All right, now you might want to change your hands and go the other way. So now what I'm going to do is watch my hands. The moment that and I'm leaning back here. Remember, I'm leaning way back. Right. The moment that he comes forward, I'm going to open up. So what we got to do is teach him how to get relief. There we go.
And I want to talk about this clip because if you see at the beginning of the video, he is trying to get this horse to move his front end away from the people, go forward so that they can teach him how to lunge. And the way that they're doing this is applying a lot of pressure up front so that the horse moves away. The way to use negative reinforcement in that situation would be that when the horse moves slightly away, you take off the pressure to reinforce the right response. But you see when he is smacking the horse in the face with this plastic bag and he hits him several times with the actual carrot stick, and when the horse moves away and he starts to go forward as if to lunge, which is the right answer, Pirelli puts the stick in front of him and prevents him from going forward. So now the horse thinks that's the wrong answer. It doesn't make any sense, and he's just hitting the horse in the face. It just is frustrating because he's not giving the horse an opportunity to be right. And then in the second clip, you notice this once in the pocket horse. At the beginning of this video, the horse is like all over the owner and rubbing him and being pushy and rude. And then in the second clip, Pirelli can't even get him to come over to him without leaning all the way back and then releasing when the horse steps forward, which is a correct application of negative reinforcement. But my thing is that the horse is not wanting to come near him anymore because the right answer a few minutes ago was to go away from the people. The thing that strikes me the most is at the end of that second clip is when Pirelli reaches over to pet the horse, which is a kind gesture. The horse, his ears start moving and his head kind of bobbles in place like he's not sure if he should move away, if he's going to get hit like the plastic bag did, if the answer is to move away, or if he should stay. And it's just kind of like this freeze moment. And then Pirelli pets him and he softens. I got another clip, hold. And running them around in circles.
By creating movement, getting the horse to run, you're establishing that pecking order, okay? I'm trying to show the horse, I'm number one, you're number two. I'm the leader, you're the follower. She doesn't like the fact that we're moving her feet. That's why she was attacking you and your mother, because she was trying to get your feet to move. When I can get the horse to think that the human being is the best deal possible, is the most rewarding option for them, now you're truly going to start getting a good relationship with your horse.
Out toward her hindquarters, putting pressure on. I want her to think, what is the answer? The answer is going to be quit acting like a prey animal and act like a partner.
It's like I need a leader. Deference to me. He says I'm important in his life with his ear. You don't have to hit a horse to get him to go faster. I can open my hand and pick his speed up immediately. Just the cat's claw. Open like that. And now this horse is so happy with me that there's just no getting away from him. He wants to kiss me. That's a good boy. That's a good boy. What you just saw.
The horses, like, it doesn't make sense because the horse can only do what is in his behavioral repertoire, and unless you install another button of what you would like the horse to do instead, he can really only just either guess or keep doing what his body is telling him to do. Asking the horse to change that without giving it any help is really not fair to the horse. To having a child and handing them a math test and being like, do the math, do it, and they're like, I don't know how to do it, nobody's telling me how to do it, I am just going to scribble and draw a picture because that's what I know how to do. And then you're just yelling at them the whole time and punishing them when they don't do it correctly without teaching them what you want them to do in the first place. And that's where I have an issue with this. Again, not hating on all traditional trainers, but I really have a problem with trainers that solely rely on being the dominant one and having the horse submit. And they use a lot of language like we're communicating with the horse in his own language. This is what he understands. They do it to each other in the pasture. How do you explain that then? Sorry, there's a tractor. Like, those things might be true, but the reason the horses are doing those behaviors is often not because they want to be doing those behaviors or that's the way they want to be trained. The wild, the natural environment, we're not horses that are competing for resources. Training does not need to resemble a domesticated lifestyle, which is not even usually conducive to the horse's natural state where they're supposed to be. Horses are supposed to be in herds and have lots of space to move around. They are not supposed to be confined or fed square meals every day. A lot of us cannot provide those basic necessities based on where we live or finances or what have you. But to base the way we train on unnatural behavioral settings is not logical. The horses would not act this way if they had all of their needs met and did not have any past experience of not having them met. A lot of the food aggression that we see in pastures is because horses may not have access to constant forage. They're fed square meals every day, pretty close together, and they're not meant to do that. And I'm not advocating for like you not feeding your horse, but the problem is that's what creates the aggression. That desperation rises and so does aggression. It comes from a fear response, and that is where I really have a problem with this conceptualization to base an entire training method off of, well, they do it to each other, this is the horse's language. It's not. That's ignoring the entire other like 90% of equine communication. They are not just chasing each other around and pinning their ears and releasing that aggression when the other horse does what they want. Sometimes, yes, not not normally, but in domesticated situations, which are unnatural and usually not necessarily the best circumstances, fine, but don't base the training off of what you're seeing in those unnatural situations. As I said in the example of the wild horse herd, there's often a lot of like really democratic communication. It's back and forth. It's reinforcing for everyone. They get to stay together and have a relationship and be a part of a herd and get food and groom each other. And there's a lot of relationship involved that really gets negated when you start hitting a horse in the face with a flag and chasing them around a pen. To say that that is communicating with a horse in their own language is not true at all. And I live on a farm of 50 horses. I don't see them chasing each other around to establish dominance. Anyway, all of that to say, I am not trying to attack people or go for ad hominems and, say these people are terrible people, but I don't agree with the training because it's not based on reality. It's based in an artificial, unnatural reality that's often used to justify really awful training, frankly. I consider beating a horse in the face or smacking them in the face or inducing fear in any circumstance to be abusive. If you are trailer loading and you're hitting the horse on the hind end with the whip and its eyes are blown out of its face, its ears are back, and it looks like it's scrambling and it's panicking.
And she was doing pretty good, wasn't she?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden she pitched a fit, reared up, whacked her nose on the door, acted like an idiot, and now she's back to being good again, isn't she? Often, just before a horse gets really good, they often get what? Really bad.
She just seemed like a totally different vibe was coming from her. Totally calm. And like he said, I think they want you to be in control.
The horse is not being an idiot. He's not being dominant. He's not being lazy or obstinate. The horse is terrified. And especially if you're hitting him with the whip and he's still not getting in the trailer, it's really frustrating that the horses take the brunt of it instead of us. I wonder how we can rework this to where the horse would want to get in there, but not because being out here is worse. Not because I'm scarier than the thing the horse is afraid of. I want to help the horse realize that this is a really good place to be, and it's not in comparison to being out is really bad. They get rewards and good things happen and everything is calm and relaxed. The people are happy, the horses are happy. That's what I want. Obviously, I'm talking about training scenarios. I am not talking about when you have to keep yourself safe or in emergency situations. Those are not training situations. Those are life and death, protect yourself, make it happen, whatever. But as an entire training ideology, to say that the horses do this to each other and they are aggressive and they are dominant is a really severe misunderstanding of the things that are contributing to that and actual equine behavior. They are very peaceful, calm, quiet, relaxed horses. I could take you outside and show you. I bet none of the horses out there are pinning their ears and chasing each other around. They're probably all grazing next to each other, enjoying the sunshine. And that's not to say that that's what we need to base training off of either. Horses are really motivated by food. They're really motivated by grooming and scratches. They're really motivated by companionship. And if you can provide those things to them, you can change their behavior and train them with those things. A lot of people in the horse world, particularly TikTok for whatever reason, it is just really aggressive on TikTok, and then the comments are full of people being like, oh my god, this is so awesome, yeah, you really showed him who's boss. I'm like, why do you need to show him who's boss? Why can't you just work with your horse? Why is it commendable that, you got the better of a horse that was misbehaving? It really hurts my heart for the horses, but also for the people. Like, that is a lot of stress and a lot of feeling like you're getting attacked and that you need to stand up for yourself and assert yourself, when there's another way to do it, that you can give them things that they like in exchange for doing things that you like. It's a very back and forth relationship, and a lot of people that do natural horsemanship and use traditional or negative reinforcement training, they still do that, but they do it in a way that's non-escalating. There isn't a threat, and the horses aren't constantly worried, being chased more, or the kicking is going to get harder, or they're going to get whipped and things like that. My particular problem is with people that justify blatant abuse. If it were any other animal, it would be abuse. It doesn't have any place in training, in my opinion. I don't see any reason that you should ever have to hit a horse for training purposes that are usually leisure, hobby, sport activities, not life or death situations. So
another reason it's very common in our industry to believe that you need to be dominant is because of a basic misunderstanding of how horses actually interact with each other. It also works through the confirmation bias. If you only look for evidence that supports what you believe, that's all you're going to find. It may work, but at what cost? Yet we still continue to think that there is a herd hierarchy, and it's just not true. Most of the conflicts between horses are resolved with peaceful interaction, and if you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend reading Raquel Dreisma's Language, Signs, and Calming Signals of Horses. You can find it on Amazon. That explains all of the behaviors that you need to understand that are commonly mislabeled. So why should it stop? Why do we need to stop using dominance theory to justify training? For one, it pushes this idea that dominance is a personality trait. Dominance is a temporary relationship descriptor regarding resources, not a horse's personality, character, and traits. The context, his environment, his traumas, his history, that is what is perpetuating the behavior that you're seeing. You might be ticklish on your feet. Nobody can tell you your feet are not ticklish. And if you are having a ticklish reaction and they're like, your feet are not ticklish, you're being ridiculous. You can't tell anybody how to feel, no more than you can tell a horse how they should be reacting. It's up to them, and it's your job to learn how to pay attention and decipher their language and how they feel and perceive. I want to wrap up by reading some take-home messages from the International Society of Equitation Science. This is their position statement on dominance in horse training. It's kind of a summary of this long thing that they have that I'll also link down below. 1. Human interaction with horses should be based on an understanding of a horse's natural behavior and consideration/understanding of their cognitive abilities. So that means not saying that horses have this concept of rank and respect and hierarchies that they literally don't have. 2. Training should be conducted in a calm, clear, and consistent way using learning theory and ethology appropriately. Again, this means using principles of operant conditioning, not this conventional wisdom and anthropomorphic ideas to just do whatever you want. It's really all just a justification that's not supported by science and comes at a cost. 3. Concepts of dominance, hierarchies, alpha position, and leadership are people's attempts to describe the complex and dynamic social organization of horses living in social groups. It's really just kind of a shortcut. Like, people are like, oh, that horse is being aggressive, he must be dominant. Instead of being like, well, actually, the horse is interacting on a one-to-one basis, perhaps because of his desire to have a specific resource based on trauma or history or fear, or his body's lacking in whatever the resource is. One of them is simpler and one of them is, that same one is also wrong. 4. Horses interact with each other mainly on bilateral levels, not according to rank order, and that includes all members of the group. Again, they interact one-to-one, not one to everyone. 5. When placed in positions that require horses to compete for a resource, one may displace the other. The horse that is displaced will then avoid the other. The predominant kind of submissive behavior a horse shows is avoidance. Like I said earlier, horses use the leader role by leaving, and when there is a conflict, often the solution is to avoid. We don't want our horses to avoid us. We want our horses to be our partners and to love us and want to work with us. Number 6, an incorrect belief that the person handling and training the horse must be in a top position of a dominance hierarchy, i.e. an alpha position, or be a leader may have damaging negative effects on the horse, perhaps resulting in avoidance behavior which is detrimental to training. So you can't train a horse if it's avoiding you the whole time. You can't train a horse if it's constantly in its sympathetic nervous system and is terrified of you the whole time. And it has a damaging effect on your relationship because your horse starts to believe you are bad. I want to avoid you because you only do scary things that hurt me and you don't listen to me when I'm trying to tell you something. I mean, a horse that is biting and kicking out at you is screaming. A horse that's bucking and rearing under saddle is screaming that something is wrong. He's not being dominant or disrespectful. And I'm a firm believer that horses act out for one of 3 reasons. It is either that they don't understand what you're asking, they're confused, they cannot do what you're asking, they are in pain and it hurts, or they are afraid to do what you're asking and are being ruled by fear. It has nothing to do with disobedience or obstinance. I cannot get behind the idea that horses are just by nature out to get us and are trying to usurp our authority and need to be dominated in order to do whatever I want it to do. No. Doesn't sit right with me. Lastly, number 7, describing the training process and horse-human interactions within the context of a dominance hierarchy jeopardizes the creation of a harmonious relationship with the horse and may compromise its welfare. Like I said, most people, when you see a video online of somebody kicking a dog, say the dog peed on the carpet and the person kicked it, you would be enraged that that happened. But if it's a horse, I mean, look at TikTok, for Christ's sake. People make fun of it. They're like, oh my god, that horse is so bad. Wow, you're such a good rider. I saw a video and I did a whole rant on my account on Instagram.
Okay, I'm feeling a little bit ranty right now because somebody tagged me in a video on TikTok of this guy just yanking the shit out of a horse's face because it reared up and he fell off. And all the comments were like, yes, this is horse training. He's got to learn his lesson. If he wants to move his feet, you better make him. Like, yep, the horse reared up and bucked you off because he wanted to move his feet. No, that's not how that works. He's probably trying to tell you something, but you know what? The solution, what you should do, is you should make the situation way worse. You should attack him, chase him with a shaking lead rope, get back on him, make him buck and rear it out, and spur him the entire time and really show him who's boss. And then, you know, the horse will actually love you and respect you and want to work with you. I hate the internet. Don't tag me in videos. I hate it. I hate it. Also, I'm not done. There's this like fun little concept called dominance theory, and you know, it was debunked. So let's maybe not use the idea that the horse must obey and be a robot and have no say in the relationship at all, because they still do have a brain and thoughts and feelings. But yeah, if you consider the horse's feelings and their thoughts, you're a Karen and you need to be stopped, and you are worth laughing at, because how dare you think that it's wrong to blatantly abuse an animal? If it were any other species, everyone would be all over it. Like, this is absolutely wrong. It's animal abuse. But you know what? Because it's a horse, it's okay, because they do it to each other. Do they actually though? Listen to my podcast, because they don't. That's science. But cool, yeah, keep believing what you want to believe, and call me a Karen for caring about equine welfare and believing, based on science, that there is a better way to train. But the only catch is that you don't get to be the boss, and you don't get to chase your horse around and be super aggressive. You can do it without doing that though, where your horse actually enjoys being around you. But cool, yeah. Oh, I don't like that video one bit at all. I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's cool. I don't think it makes anybody in that video look good. I also watched her following video explaining why he was doing the things that he was doing, and apparently this horse is going to be a little girl's barrel horse, and the horse must learn how to behave to be safe for the girl, but the horse isn't learning anything other than that people are very scary, and when the horse tries to communicate that it is either in pain, confused, or afraid, that it will be beaten into submission, and that it might as well just never try to communicate with humans if something is wrong with it, and it will just live in pain and suffer through learned helplessness for the rest of its life. And that is why I am so passionate about this, and it drives me absolutely insane to see people propagating this and saying that you're stupid if you believe anything else. No! Science, dude! What?
This comment section on this video of this horse rearing and bucking, and the horse was clearly in distress. Everybody in the comments was like, wow, that was kind of hot. Like, I really love a man who can handle a horse, and like, that's the correct way to handle the horse. And all the Karens in the comments are gonna be like, that's abuse, but they just don't understand how to train horses. It's so painfully ironic to me, because in fact, the ones that are saying that are the ones that do not understand horses. It blows my mind, the arrogance. When you have not looked into anything, and yet you're saying the people that are advocating for the animals' welfare are the ones that are undereducated. That's a big oof, my guy. Like, I don't know, it's just patronizing too. Like, you're not a Karen for saying that maybe animals should be treated better. Like I said, if it were any other animal, we would be like, okay, yeah, let's not act like that. Take a dog. In that same exact circumstance, the dog is clearly uncomfortable, and you run up to it and make it back up and get away from you to teach it a lesson. Okay, I officially filled up that card. We're gonna wrap it up here, but I hope that you guys get my points, understand, and take a look at the research that I linked down below and listen to the full episodes on the podcast about this, because it is a really important concept and it is time to change. I strongly believe that we are the generation that is here for change and to disrupt the tradition, and we have access at our fingertips to information that wasn't available before. They had an excuse for being ignorant in the past. We are so ruled by science in so many other ways. You don't go to the doctor and they say, okay, you should probably take this medication and your sickness will go away. Most people aren't like, actually, I think I'm just gonna like heat up some rocks and like put it on my shoulders because my grandma said that works to, you know, fix my arthritis. Like, we don't work that way in any other industry. We don't rely so heavily on tradition, but in the horse world, that's just the way it's done. People seem to think that you have to be aggressive to your animal in order to get it to do what you want, and you just don't. You can be so much kinder. I think that we are finally reaching reaching a place in the horse world where, you know, maybe that can become the norm. I at least have hope, and I hope that you do too, and you heard me out, and even if you didn't agree with everything I said, you at least start thinking and doing your own research. Don't take my word for it. Look at all the things that I linked down below. Do your own searching, find studies that are from, you know, recent years. Anyway, that is all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for listening and hearing me out. I hope that you learned something, and if you want to follow me on other socials, please check me out at EquiTheory on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and I also have a website where I have a blog and everything that you could ever need to know about starting positive reinforcement, and a bunch of resources, my story, my history, everything is on my website. So be sure to check that out and follow along, and be sure to also check out the podcast. With that said, I want to thank you guys. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.